My boyfriend spent 5 years paying tickets for crimes they didn't do. What started as a simple wrong turn on a newly converted one-way street turned into a nightmare we never saw coming. My boyfriend's driving record had been merged with someone else's for 5 years, and we didn't know. The truth only came out recently, and the impact has been devastating. The wrong turn that started it all. It was an innocent mistake. My boyfriend, 28, took a wrong turn onto a road that had just been converted to a one-way earlier that day. When the cop pulled him over, we weren't too worried. It was an honest mistake. But then the officer said his license had been suspended for 6 months because of a ticket issued in a county 2 hours away. That didn't make any sense. We hadn't left town in over a year. Confused and frustrated, we started digging. What we found out turned everything upside down. My boyfriend's driving record had been merged with another person's for 5 years, and we didn't know. We had no idea how this happened, but it explained so much about the constant problems he'd been having. Discovering the merge. We didn't figure this out until we started fighting the ticket. When we got a public defender involved, they told us my boyfriend could be treated as a repeat offender and might face jail time. That's when we requested his full driving record, and what came back was shocking. There were 3 full pages of charges, many of which my boyfriend didn't commit. DUIs, speeding tickets, running red lights, driving trucks without a CDL, you name it. These weren't just mistakes. They were crimes my boyfriend didn't commit, in places he'd never been. That's when we learned his record had been merged with someone else's. Another driver whose mistakes and crimes had been attached to his license. And until recently, we had no idea this was happening. The confusion ran deeper because this issue spanned 2 states. The first suspension happened years ago when my boyfriend lived in one state and the other driver lived in our home state. As a result, both states listed his license as suspended. Anytime he tried to fix it, one state would blame the other, leaving us stuck in a frustrating cycle of finger-pointing. It was impossible to get clear answers or resolve the issue. The gaslighting effect. The worst part was how confusing and overwhelming this was. The files were somehow separate in some systems and merged in others. For example, when my boyfriend fixed his license in the past, it would get suspended again almost immediately. We didn't know why, so we assumed he was doing something wrong. Every time we tried to get answers, we hit a wall. It felt like we were being gaslit by the system. It wasn't until very recently that we realized the 2 people were linked and that every issue was tied to this other driver's record. The confusion drove us crazy, and we were chasing solutions in all the wrong places because the truth wasn't clear. The everyday nightmare of a suspended license. The problems ran deep. If either person's license was suspended, it affected both of them. So my boyfriend would fix his license, only for it to get suspended again because of something the other driver did. We suspect the other guy was just as confused as we were. And it wasn't just about fixing the license. It was about what happened every time he got pulled over. My boyfriend wasn't paying for the other guy's tickets directly, but he was paying for the system's mistake. For example, if he got pulled over for something minor, like a brake light going out, the cops wouldn't just give him a warning. Instead, they'd give him a ticket for driving on a suspended license. Where we live, cops run plates often. If they see a suspension pop up, they'll pull you over, even if it's just to double check. My boyfriend drives an old beat-up car that stands out, so he got pulled over a lot. And every stop turned into another ticket for a suspended license. Something he never should have had in the first place. How the system hurt his job prospects. Beyond the tickets and stress, the suspended license made it almost impossible for my boyfriend to find steady work. Many jobs require a valid license, even for positions that don't involve driving. With the suspension showing up in background checks, employers didn't want to take the risk of hiring someone with what looked like a history of reckless behavior. The issue was further complicated because it spanned 2 states. The first suspension happened when my boyfriend had just moved back to our home state, but the other driver lived in a different state at the time. He had been given 2 speeding tickets there and assumed that was the reason for his license being revoked. In both states, his license showed as suspended, and both states pointed the finger at each other. The situation became a confusing back and forth of, it's the other state's problem, which led him to believe he was doing something wrong, but he didn't realize the new suspensions were due to the other person's charges. Every time he thought he'd fixed the issue, he would get pulled over again and told his license was still suspended. The court said he had to pay the tickets and resolve the suspension, but every time he thought he was in the clear, the license would be suspended again. If he called to get clarity, he was just told to fix it again. The whole system kept telling him it was his fault, and that was why he never looked deeper into it. He just kept assuming he'd made some mistake when trying to fix it, even though he couldn't figure out why his license kept getting suspended after it was supposedly unsuspended. How the records were merged and the hidden truth. Here's where things get even crazier. The records were merged, but not in every system. When he looked up his own record, it only showed the tickets that he had been issued. He couldn't see the other person's offenses because they had a different license number. The merging of their records was buried deeper in his files, and no one at first knew it was even a possibility. It took a lot of phone calls, legal battles, and research to finally figure this out. He fought many of the tickets he was given, but every time, he lost. It always looked like he had a suspended license, and he was getting ticketed for things that didn't make sense. He would go to court, and the judge would tell him to pay the fine, not understanding that it wasn't his fault. Lawyers we talked to couldn't even comprehend how something like this could happen. Some of them hadn't seen it before, and no one could explain where or how the 2 records had merged. One time after the 3rd suspension, He even called the cops and asked them to double-check his license. They confirmed it was cleared, yet a few months later, he'd be pulled over again for the same thing, another suspended license ticket. It was an endless loop of confusion and frustration. The ticketing trap, paying for his own tickets due to someone else's crime. My boyfriend was not receiving someone else's tickets, nor was he responsible for the other person's charges. What happened was that due to the merged records, it appeared that my boyfriend was continuously driving with a suspended license. He was being ticketed for his own offenses, driving without privileges because his license was flagged as suspended, even though he was doing everything to get it unsuspended. The other person's offenses were never added to my boyfriend's record directly, but the suspension statuses were connected, causing repeated suspensions on both ends. The tickets he was receiving were real, and he was driving with a valid license in his own mind. He just couldn't shake the system's wrongful association of his license with someone else's. It was a confusing and unfair cycle where he was punished for something he had no control over, a link that was hidden and not easily noticed. Update and what's next. Now here's the next step. We've learned that the state is in the process of unlinking the two drivers' files. My boyfriend reported his license as stolen, so they would issue a new one, hoping this will be the fix. However, we're still in the middle of this and have yet to find a lawyer to help sue for an issue that shouldn't have been. We also spoke to someone who had helped us with the issue in the past, and they told us that this situation, where two people's records get merged, has happened before, though it's rare. They said it often happens when two people have similar names or license numbers, but never like how my BF and the other guy ended up linked. It was never caught earlier because both men kept accepting the situation, assuming the problem was their fault. Oh, and just to add one more complication, my boyfriend likes buying cars on Facebook, and he once got a ticket for no insurance when he was driving a new car home, making the more of the issues seem like a consequence of his own actions. We're still working through everything, trying to get answers and make sure this never happens again. But this whole ordeal has been one of the most confusing and stressful things we've ever had to deal with. Let me know if you need further clarification.